as great as your dominant aspiration, as from As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. So Dr. Pankey then traveled to Switzerland, as she had wanted him to do. In Lucerne and Zurich, he met Dr. Alfred Geissy, dean of the Zurich Dental School, an inventor of the Geissy articulator. He also studied under Carl Jung, the world-renowned psychiatrist. The trio went to Lake Como, Italy, and the Villa d'Este to find a dentist to treat Dr. Pankey's traveling partner's toothache. After this, they went to Salzburg and Innsbruck, finally ended up in Vienna. In Vienna, the American Express office, a cableman was waiting. He informed Dr. Pankey of his wife's death in an automobile accident. Dr. Pankey left immediately for the 3-week trip to the United States, and his friend Jimmy Clock was accompanying him to comfort him on the way. When he returned to Coral Gables, he had asked Dr. Roy Bovard to join Dr. Pankey's practice. And Dr. Pankey's sister came from Chicago, she was a dental hygienist, came from Chicago to care for his daughter Kitty, which enabled Dr. Pankey to take Dr. Smith's advice for postgraduate education. LD signed up for the 3-month summer course at Northwestern during the summer of 1932. And the course included the diagnosis, the treatment planning, and patient interviews. He also took a course in psychology from Dr. George Crane, who stressed the cross of life and the need to balance your work, your play, your love, and your worship for a truly fulfilling life. In the psychology course, he studied the work of Carl Jung, learning about personality types, the introvert, extrovert, ambivert. He also studied the Binet-Simon scale, developed in 1905 to determine the intellectual capacity of children. This gave him the idea of his dental IQ concept, as well as the patient's intellectual, sociological, and economic classification. Dr. Crane's course gave Dr. Pankey the knowledge and communication skills that he needed for his practice in the basic elements of his philosophy of the practice of dentistry. LD first heard the word occlusion in the summer of 1931 while he was at Northwestern, and he asked the librarian for all the papers on occlusion. There was only one, and it was by Clyde Schuyler, a reprinted from the 1926 New York Dental Journal. And after speaking with Dr. Schuyler, LD began to understand the principles a little better, and he used these principles for 20 years without saying anything about it to anyone. If Dr. Pankey had not gone to Northwestern for postgraduate courses that summer, many elements of his philosophy and the technical expertise he became known for would not have fallen into place. It was there that he learned the principles of occlusion from Dr. Schuyler, the cross of life, a system of diagnosis, treatment planning, and patient interviews, and the psychology concepts leading to his dental IQ. In 1933, the property values were such that he was able to buy land in Coral Gables for the price of 50% of the unpaid taxes. On this land, he built his 22-room dental bungalow, one of the first in the United States, in October 1934. In 1947, a very fine dentist, Dr. Arvin Mann, this is the 8th turning point, and it's very key to the development of this philosophy and to the Pankey Institute. Dr. Mann moved to Fort Lauderdale, and he came to Dr. Pankey to learn his technique of occlusal rehabilitation, diagnosis, treatment planning, and how to use the philosophy to get to know the patient and educate the patient to accept treatment. By this time, Dr. Pankey had given his seminar on philosophy clear across the country, so many people had heard about it, and that's why Dr. Mann wanted to come to Dr. Pankey. So Dr. Mann would bring models and x-rays of his patients to Dr. LD's office, and he would diagnose the case together. Dr. Pankey would present the case to Dr. Mann as if Dr. Mann was the patient. Dr. Mann finally convinced Dr. Pankey to present the information to the dental profession. So they wrote the Pankey-Mann Technique Manual. Having made presentations before countless local, state, national, and international dental groups, LD was best known for his seminars on a philosophy of the practice of dentistry. In 1956, his philosophy lectures were organized into 3-day seminars, and they called them the Occlusal Rehabilitation Seminars, ORS. Dr. Pankey and Mann selected 11 dentists from various parts of the country who had taken the philosophy course at least 3 times. They met with these dentists and formed the Occlusal Rehabilitation Seminars. Dr. Pankey practiced this philosophy and restorative technique for 20 years without sharing that information, but now was the time. If Dr. Mann had not persuaded him to go public, there might not be a Pankey Institute today. Enter Dr. Loren Miller and John Anderson in 1958. Dr. Loren Miller was the short list to be Dean of the Baylor University Dental School in Dallas, and Dr. John Anderson was on the short list to be Dean at Northwestern University in Chicago. And they were consummate dedicated to learning, and technical excellence. And they just couldn't get enough of listening to Dr. Pankey and Dr. Schuyler and Dr. Mann. And they somehow wanted to eventually work together in teaching. So in 1959, they were having trouble teaching the occlusal concepts from the lecture format, and they persuaded Dr. Clyde Schuyler to join them in teaching occlusion. They began giving the Pankey, Mann, Schuyler seminars, which most people know now as the PMS seminars, attracting dentists from throughout the United States and many other nations. Their occlusal rehabilitation procedures became known as the PMS technique. And Rose Quick, Dr. Pankey's secretary, became the coordinator of those seminars. And I remember attending some of those in the early 60s through almost to 1970. The conception of the L.D. Pankey Institute was begun in 1969, the Florida Academy of Dental Practice Administration meeting. Jack Wilkins and Jim Cosper, Billy Anderson discussed a gift or a gesture to show their appreciation to Dr. Pankey for his contributions to their lives and to dentistry. There was much discussion, and finally Rose Quick suggested, why don't you start a foundation in his name, surprise him in this manner, and allow him to be part of the decision. You can't buy anything that he couldn't just get for himself if he wanted it. So many ideas were discussed. Shall they endow a chair at a dental school? Shall they be part of a medical school? Shall there be separate postgraduate school, not like academia? And through advice from many people around the country, they said, do not be a part of academia. Dr. Harold Worth, and Dr. Pankey's close friend was from New Orleans, was asked to chair a new group, a planning committee, composed of Jack Wilkins, Billy Anderson, Bob Barkley, my old classmate, Peter Dawson, Jim Cosper, John Anderson, and Loren Miller. And Dr. Pankey gave him a charge. He said, if you can raise $1 million, I think that you will be able to do what we want to do. The planning committee got busy, and they went to all the various study clubs that Dr. Pankey had spoken to. And I well remember contributing a small amount of money to that here in Oklahoma City, back when they were raising that money. But finally, they had committed the $200,000 of the committee, but they were stymied. They couldn't raise any more. They were $40,000 short. Well, Billy Anderson excused himself from the meeting. He said, wait a minute. And he called Hal Pearson, who was president at that time of the Dental Ease Company. And Mr. Pearson had praised John Anderson for helping design the dental chair for which the company was named. And he said, I am pleased to donate the $40,000 you need. The formation of the L.D. Pankey Foundation was announced at the Florida State Dental Meeting, but without the inspiration of Dr. Pankey's philosophy and the gratitude and appreciation of many recipients, the Pankey Institute would not have come into being. In his book about the beginning of the Institute, Dr. Miller aptly wrote, the dream had become reality. In 1970, in the Bahamas, this is to be the 9th and final turning point that is really the key to this whole story. In November of 1970, the ORS faculty met on a large schooner in the Bahamas. And Loren Miller had been talking to Harold Worth, Dr. Pankey's very good friend, Harold Worth, and they had discussed about the possibility of Loren devoting full time to the project of the Pankey Institute. Lauren agreed only if Dr. Pankey would be pleased. And when Harold Worth mentioned it to Dr. Pankey, he said, "I am very pleased." So while at Anchor, Harold Worth made the announcement that Lauren will serve as executive director of the foundation. And Dr. Anderson stood up immediately and said, "If Lauren will do this, so will I," which was met with great applause. Lauren went on to serve as the executive director of the Pankey Institute, and John was the director of education. Now I'm asking each of you, can you imagine that at 50 years of age, which these two men were, giving up your lucrative practice to follow a dream of creating a teaching institute with a radically new curriculum that had never been tried before, and asking your wife to leave her home and her friends to move to a condo in Miami? These two men risked everything and dedicated their lives and fortunes to create a meaningful life for others. And they changed dentistry forever. The beginning of the Institute, the first class began in October 1972 at the DuPont Plaza in Miami, Florida. And I was so fortunate that soon after they started to be selected as one of the original 13 cadre teaching assistants, for which I would visit and stay and teach and learn 2 to 4 weeks every year. It was a significant time of learning in my life. It was an opportunity that could never happen again. This story is significant because the power of purpose that changes lives and leaves a lasting legacy for generations to come. First, we make a commitment, a firm commitment, not a hope or a wish, and then combine this commitment with the daily discipline to become a continual learner, and the dedication to apply the principles of what you learned, and finally, the persistence to stay on the path of mastery to achieve your vision and purpose. So set your goals high and continue your journey with a passion. You can create a life that matters.